We have here a 1910 2575 horsepower Scott steamer. Just go by here. I'll try to identify as many of them as I possibly can for you. Some of them I don't know. We have coming up a 1929 Model A Roadster. And behind that is a 1928 Model A hot top. Following along now is a 1937 Packard. And coming up is a 1922 motorhome. Another Model A Roadster, a 1928. And a Hupmobile. That's about a 1934-35 Hupmobile. 1924 Model T pickup. The former vice president of Western Minnesota Steam Thresher Union, 1950 Chevrolet. This is a 1950 Chevrolet owned by Mr. Stan Brophy. A 1926 correction. I just about called it a half ton. It's a 3/4 ton, isn't it? Right. Yep, I can see from here by the wheel. 3/4 ton and where the wheel coming up here was purchased new by the Lake Region Co-op. We have coming up here now a 1929 Mercedes-Benz. And following that is a 1926 Oldsmobile. Now we have a 1950 Chevrolet. This vehicle, I don't know. We have here a 1926 3/4 ton International truck. Built by International Harvester Company. Mr. Potassic purchased this Ford in 1941. He's had it ever since. He's driving it through the parade here today. There's a 1946 Ford half-ton. 42 Chevrolet pickup. Now this is a half-ton. It's a nice Model A Model T Ford up there. 42 Chevrolet pickup. A 1933 Chevrolet truck. 1 ton, right? Now we have a 1950 maintenance vehicle that was used by a power company in Minnesota here for a number of years and then was donated here to WMSTR. This also is a truck that was donated. It's a 1954 Chev cab-over, and it is carrying a little John Deere MC crawler. We have a 1942 military Jeep. And then we have a 1926 Model T Ford truck. With a standard open gear steering on it, meaning that it was built before 1930 and wrong side of it. And we have a 1942 Chevrolet 3/4 ton pickup. Prior to 1930, they had the And following that is a 1933 Chev, 1 ton. We have here a Farmhouse regular. They originally come out on steel wheels. They were made first in 1924 and was International Harvester's attempt to develop a Farmhouse or row crop type tractor to enter into the small tractor needs. We have here a 816 mogul. This is a 1-cylinder engine, 8-inch bore, 12-inch stroke. It's a hopper-cooled engine, and it represents International's attempt to bring in a small tractor for the small farmer back in 1914. Following that is a 1920 gray tractor, the one on our right there. That's what they call a drum drive. One big wheel on the back, that's all one wheel across the back end of the tractor. And they were a 4-cylinder engine and a 2-speed transmission. Following that is a 1921 Frick, a 1528 horsepower, 4-cylinder Beaver engine in that tractor. We have a tractor coming up on our right there now, which is a 1935 McCormick Deering Farmhouse F12. That was the smallest of the Farmhouse made in the 30s. We have a hot par, 1836. One coming up now is a Huber, 1921 Huber Super 4, 1836 horsepower. That's a 4-cylinder engine running at 1200 RPM. This engine is a IHC Titan. The Titans were made from 1915 until 1921. They were a 1020 horsepower, 2-cylinder horizontal with a 2-speed transmission, and were tank cooled. Most of these tractors going through here now, I'll leave for you, the viewers to identify. They're more of the modern tractors. I'll just pick out the odd one of the older ones that are a little rarer and sometimes a little harder to identify. They go through here so fast that it was impossible for the announcer in the announcing booth to announce and identify every tractor that went through. Some of the tractors are handy. They carry their name and horsepower rating and identification right on them, so you can view them as they go by. We have here International Harvesters Mccormick Deering 1020 on our right. They were first made in 1923. And following that is the Mccormick Deering 2236, and they were made in 1928. As these tractors go through here, I'll try to give you the first year that the model was manufactured. Some of them were manufactured for quite a spell of time, so the year I'm listing will be roughly the first year of manufacture. As with that 1020 Mccormick Deering, they were first made in 1923, but they were manufactured right up until 1939. We have an odd one coming up on the left-hand side of the screen there now. That three-wheeler. That is called a Theman. They were made in about 1935-36, and they usually carried a Ford Model A engine, although occasionally they were available with either a Chev or a Dodge. The little tractor on steel coming in behind there is a 2N Ford on steel. They were made back in 1935-36. Another International Harvester 1020 Titan. And a McCormick Deering 1020 on rubber. There was quite a movement in the early 30s to put tractors on rubber, and there was a company by the name of French and Heilecker that came out with a rubber-tired conversion for a lot of tractors, and that's how come you see a lot of these tractors carrying rubber tires with the round spoke wheels. That crawler coming in on the right of our screen there now is a Caterpillar RD6. That's a 3-cylinder diesel. They were made from about 1936 on, and that crawler replaced the R5, which was a gas crawler. The next crawler in the line here is a Caterpillar built, but it was designed by Holt and Best originally, and this is the Best crawler, manufactured by Caterpillar after the amalgamation and called the Cat 60. That's a 1925. And again we have the 1925 Cat 60. Caterpillar 60. The tractor on our right of our screen there is the Minneapolis 1730. They were made in 1922. This little crawler here is a Caterpillar 10. They were usually painted gray, but this one's got yellow paint on it. But they were made from 1929 to 31, and that was the smallest Caterpillar in the Caterpillar line in that era. The little four-wheel drive tractor on our left there is a Massey Harris general purpose, 1530 horsepower. Here's a view of some of the musicians here at WMSTR. And there's always old-time music going on in many of the buildings around here. You can drop in and sit down and spend a few minutes listening to the old-time music almost any time during the day. You notice a lot of younger drivers in here. There's a lot of the young people taking an interest in these tractors, and in many cases the wife has even taken interest in the tractors and driving tractors in the show here. So it really makes for a nice family outing, lots of these antique tractor parades that we see through the country, because the whole family is able to take part in it. You'll notice a grader coming into view there now on our left. That is one of the early attempts to put engine power on graders. This particular grader is using a Mccormick Deering 1020 tractor with a track attachment as the power unit for the grader, and these were developed in the early 30s, this type of unit. And International had been toying around with the idea of putting tracks on a tractor, and in 1928 they came out with what they called the 1020 track tractor, and this is one of the applications of that Mccormick Deering track tractor, is to power that grader unit. Previous to that, type of grader would be the red crawler coming into our view on the left there is an IHC Mccormick Deering TD40. That was IHC's first diesel track tractor. They were made in 1934. Nice Twin City there, 2132. Another Twin City coming up there, 1926, 2035. Here we have an IHC 816. You know, there's a Ford tractor coming into view there now. It's a 1952 Ford Jubilee, and that one has been a conversion job. They put a V8 flathead engine into that to give it increased horsepower. Here we have a Massey Harris general purpose, 1530 horsepower. That's a four-wheel drive, and they were made in the early 30s. The tractor we have coming in now is a carryover from the steamer days. It's a Townsend oil engine, 3060, and they were a development from the steam era where they put a gas burning or a kerosene burning engine on top of a steamer and drove it in that manner. They used the boiler for carrying the coolant and the fuel for the engine. Next we have a Rumley G. That's a 2040, a two-cylinder, horizontal. That's an oil-cooled tractors. All the Rumley tractors used oil for coolant. We have here the Twin City 6090. This was the largest Twin City tractor and one of the largest kerosene burning tractors ever built back in that era. Next we have the Imperial. That's rated at a 4070 horsepower. It's a four-cylinder horizontal opposed. There wasn't many of those engines around the country. Here we have the Altman Taylor 3060. That's a four-cylinder engine, 7-inch bore and a 9-inch stroke running at 500 RPM. That tractor was really underrated because in Nebraska test it put out 58 horsepower on the drawbar and 80 horse on the belt. Next is the Pioneer 3060. That was a 4-cylinder horizontal opposed. That tractor in 1911 cost $2,850. Have here a Case 4072, made in 1923. That was the largest of the Case cross mounts. It was probably a tractor ahead of its time. It was a lot of horsepower in a small compact unit. And coming in the 30s, it was probably too big for most of the small farmers at that time. Here we have the Minneapolis 3570. That was a 4-cylinder tractor. It had 1 speed forward at 2 miles an hour. Next one is the Huber 3060, 1912. That's a 4-cylinder engine. That engine carried 95 gallons of water and 65 gallons of kerosene. The rear wheels were 90 inches in diameter. Here we have a Nicholson Shepherd, 1916, 3570 horsepower. It's a 2-cylinder horizontal. Nicholson Shepherd stayed with their big engines for quite a period of time. In fact, they were still manufacturing engines like this in the mid-20s, and when the demand for the smaller tractors, and probably a reason why they went broke in that period of time. Here we have the Flower City, 1911 Flower City, 4070 horsepower. It's a 4-cylinder inline tractor, and this one had a 2-speed transmission. Here we have a 1924 Rumley S 3060 lightweight, 2-cylinder horizontal. Another one of the Rumley line. Here we have a Hyder 1924. It's a 1527 horsepower. That's a friction drive tractor with a plow on the back. No clutches and no transmissions in that tractor. Here we have a Huber, 1927. It's a 4062. We have an 816 International. This was International's attempt to satisfy the small farmer with a reasonable horsepower size tractor. They came out in 1917. They were a 4-cylinder tractor, and they had a 3-speed transmission, which was Not very common in those days. Here we have a 1918 Coleman. That's a rare one. That's a 1630 horsepower, 4-cylinder inline engine. They only made this one style of tractor, and in 1918 it cost $1,750. Here we have a 1925 Holt Caterpillar. This was built by the Caterpillar Company after the amalgamation of Holt and Best. This is the model they call the 5-ton. Here we have another Holt Caterpillar. This is another 1925 crawler, and this model is the 10-ton. Here we have the Twin City 6090. This one carried a 6-cylinder vertical inline engine, 7¼ inch bore, and a 9-inch stroke. It had a radiator capacity of 116 gallons of water, and the fuel tank for kerosene held 95 gallons of kerosene. The tractor weighed 27,500 pounds, and in 1913 cost $6,000. Here we have the 3060 Huber coming through 1912. Here we have the Nicholson Shepherd. This is a 1923 model. They were made from about 1916 up until about 1925. It's a 3570. In this era, they had started to dispense with the cabs on a lot of the tractors. This is the 1911 Pioneer 3060. They were a 4-cylinder horizontal opposed engine. Those rear wheels are 90 inches in diameter. Here we have a little Avery, 1836. That's a 4-cylinder opposed. First engine to use replaceable cylinder sleeves. Here we have a little case CCS, high crop, high clearance model, 1930. And a 1919 Waterloo Boy, 1225. This is the engine that was taken over by John Deere and manufactured and sold by John Deere prior to them bringing out their own 2-cylinder Model D. Here we have an Altman Taylor 1918 model. This is a 2245 horsepower. This is last of the heavyweight engines built by Altman Taylor. They built these for quite a period, right into the mid-20s, and they were finally bought out by Rumley in 1924. Here we have a Rumley 1911, 1530. It's a single-cylinder engine. It had a 10-inch bore and a 12-inch stroke. Next is a 1918 Rumley, 1428, 2-cylinder. This one was re-rated in 1919 to 1630. Here we have a 1919 Rumley K, 1220, 2-cylinder, 2-speed. This one was a small engine for the small farmer. Here we have 3060 Rumley, 1924, 3060 Rumley. This is referred to as the lightweight, although they were still quite a heavy tractor. The steamer we have coming on here is a 1905 18 horsepower Huber. That's a return flue type engine. That boiler horsepower on these most of these engines here. This is a 1905 16 horsepower Buffalo Pitts. This one is a 1911 2575 Guy Scott. The larger horsepower figure is the brake horsepower. Next we have it's about a 1909 24 horsepower Minneapolis. This one here is a 1910 20 horsepower Avery. Avery was one of the few steamer manufacturers that put the motor on an underslung design. Another 1910 20 horsepower Avery. Here we have a 1909 75 horsepower Port Huron. This one is a tandem compound engine. There's a 1911 Russell 90 brake horsepower. This one coming in here is the 30 Special Avery. They sometimes refer to it as 40, but basically it was a 30 boiler horsepower, 1911 engine. Here we have the big Rumley. This one was rated at 36,120, but this rating it wasn't able to live up to really. It never really developed the 120 brake horsepower. Here we have about a 1910 24 horsepower Minneapolis. There's a 1911 28 horsepower Minneapolis. This one has the special plowing wheels on it and the special bow gears for the extra heavy work that needed for plowing of the prairie sod. Here we have a 1910 24 horsepower Minneapolis. And another 1910 24 horsepower Minneapolis. This one is a Rumley, 1911, called the 2060 Universal. This engine here is about a 1900 10 horsepower Birdsall tractor, and that's a bevel gear drive engine. We have here the big Minneapolis. This is a 1906 45 horsepower, and that is a tandem compound engine. That's a beautifully restored engine. This emblem here of the Case company was put here by the Case Expo people in commemoration of J.I. Case and the pioneers of the nation. Here we have a 30 horsepower Case. That's 30 brake horsepower. That's the smallest traction engine that Case built, and that's a 1916. Following that is one of the largest that they built, largest in existence today anyway, is a 1912 110 Case, and that's 110 brake horsepower. They did build a few models of a Case 150. Something like about 8 models were built, but there is none known today in existence. Here we have a 1911 110 Case. They did have a boiler on display here at Rolag this year of a 150 horsepower Case engine, and to the best of the knowledge is that's all that remains of the big 150s. We have another beautifully dressed up engine here, 1912 110. There was 7 different models of 110 Cases at the Expo show here this year. Here we have the oldest model of the 110s, 1908. Quite a few of these engines nowadays are getting used more and more for thrashing demonstrations and plowing demonstrations, and they start to get a little dirty with the smoke and that after having been so nicely restored in originally. Here we have a 1913 110 Case. And that is pulling a Case thrashing machine. That's one of the largest thrashing machines ever built. It's a 44-inch cylinder and a 66-inch deck, and is the only one known in existence that's still running in operating condition at the present time. That one came from Jack Beamish at Hamiota, Manitoba, and it's also pulling the Case water wagon and fuel wagon that the steamers always needed in their operation. Here we have a 1911 110. And that one is pulling a 14 bottom plow. John Deere plow. In 1913, 110. Here we have a 30 horsepower case. This is the little case steamer that you'll see a little later on leading the plowing demonstration. Here we have the smallest traction engine built by Case. It's a 1907, 9 horsepower, and that's 9 boiler horsepower. Here we have a 1902 12 horsepower Case. Here we have one of the oldest steamers in the parade. It's about a 1894 12 horsepower Case. And that is what they call the center crank. Here we have a 1916 40 Case. And it's pulling its coal wagon along behind there with it to give it a supply of coal. Next is a 1970 60 Case. And this one came down from Manitoba, came from a group of people at Treherne, Manitoba. Here's another of the small cases. This was built in 1910, about there, and that's a 9 horsepower Case. We have here a 1903 25 horsepower. Following that is a 1917 50 horsepower Case, and this is a butt strap boiler type of engine. This one is also 1916. It's a 65 horsepower Case. Here's a 1902 25 horsepower. And that one has on the special plowing wheels and the special bow gears that were required heavy duty for the plowing of the prairie sods in the early part of the century. Following that is a 1916 50 horsepower case. Here we have a little miniature case there. That's a scale model of a 65 case. And beside it is a 1922 65 case. And following that is a earlier model of the 65 case. That's about a 1916 one. The model coming in view there now is a 1902 9 horsepower case. That's a boiler horsepower rating, and that is a tandem compound engine. Here we have a 1913 80 horsepower case. Following along in there is another 1911 80 horsepower case. Here we have a 1910 25 75 Reeves. Here we have a 1911 45 horsepower case. This engine was taken down from Manitoba to be in the Case Expo show. That engine came from Brookdale, Manitoba. And bringing up the rear of the case steamers here is the 1923 40 horsepower case steam road roller. That one was actually used in Toronto, sold into Toronto in its early days. .12 case, 3060, 2-cylinder, horizontal. Bore is 10 inch and the stroke is 12 inch, 365 RPM. That tractor cost $2,500 in 1912. Another case, 1912, 3060. These case engines were a real workhorse in that era. Here we have the case 2040, 1912. Two-cylinder opposed. Had a two-speed transmission in this one, 2 mile an hour and 3 mile an hour. That tractor cost in 1912 $2,000. This is another of the Case 2040s. That one's a 1918 model. They were replaced in 1923 with the Case 2240 cross mount. Another Case 2040. Here we have another case, 1915, 1225. Two-cylinder opposed, two-speed. This was the move by Case to get into smaller tractors for the smaller farmers after the Virgin Prairie was broken. Another case, 1916 Case 1020 three-wheeler. This was specifically designed to meet the needs of the small farmer who just had a 160-acre farm and didn't need the big tractors that we've seen previous. This tractor in 1916 sold for $1,000. We have here a Rock Island Hider, 1527. That was a friction drive tractor. No transmission, no clutch. You slid the engine back and forth to change your speed of ground travel. Rock Island was bought out in 1937 by the J.I. Case Company. Here we have the 1910 Emerson Bramington Big 4, four-cylinder. It was a 3060 horsepower. The rear wheels on that tractor were 99 inches high, and it weighed 21,000 pounds and could be purchased in 1910 for $2,800. This engine we have here is a 1913 Emerson Bramington Big 4, six-cylinder. That's a 4590. The engine weighs 23,000 pounds. This is the only one known in existence today, and it has been in restoration process this last several years, and this is the first year that it's been in parades in this part of the country. Emerson Bramington was bought out by J.I. Case in 1928. Here we have another Case, 1913 1225. That's another one of those nice little case tractors for the small farmer. Here we have a 1919 case cross mount. This is one of the early case cross mounts, a 1527. That's a 4-cylinder engine in a cast frame, and that replaced the old 2-cylinder 1225 that we just saw go by. And this tractor in 1919 cost $1,800. Here we have a 1925 case 1832 4-cylinder. That one replaced the first engine that we saw. Here we have the case 1921 1220 4-cylinder in a cast frame. This one replaced the 3-wheel 1020 that we saw a little while ago. And here we have the 1923 case 4072. This is a 4-cylinder cross-mounted engine. One of the largest tractors built in that era. It had a 2-speed transmission, 2 and 3 miles per hour. The Nebraska test on that tractor showed that it put out a drawbar horsepower of 58 and a belt horsepower of 91. So it probably could have been rated 5890. This engine could pull up to 14 plows on good plowing conditions. And in 1923, that engine could be purchased for $4,900. Here we have another 1923 case cross mount. This one is a 2240, 4-cylinder also, a 2-speed, 2.1 and 3.1 miles per hour. This one replaced the older 2040 that we saw previous, and that engine cost $3,100 in 1923. And here we have a case cross-mount road roller used for packing down the roads in the early days. Now we're moving into the modern case tractors. And we'll let these go through and you can view them and put the name on them as they go, because these are relatively modern tractors. We have a case car in the parade here today too. Case also manufactured cars, and not very many, but there's still a few around the country. We have here coming up case 1914 S35 5-passenger touring car. This car is carrying Mrs. Helen Case Bingham, who is instrumental in taking these case expos around the country. That case car is in original condition. It has never been restored, and that came from the Elkhorn Museum in Elkhorn, Manitoba. Case Eagle 1020. This is a steam engine on the railway that they have around the WMSTR grounds here. It's carrying a case separator there, and also on there is a case steam engine you'll see as it goes by. With the water tank also. In these converted cattle cars, there's bleachers set up in there, and a lot of people ride on the railway cars here. That's a free ride that goes around the railway track here on the grounds. That track is about 3 miles long, and these trains run all day long, every day of the show here. And you can get on there and get a real good view of everything that's taking place on the grounds. setting up here for the Case 110 horsepower plowing demonstration. They're trying to line up 6 engines here. Will be plowing all at once, 610 horse case. This is the view of the antique display buildings at Rolag. Gives you a view of some of the terrain around here as we're getting ready for this plowing demonstration. Quite rolling hillside country in here. Some of the engines are waiting there and they're having to blow off steam because they're all steamed up ready to plow. Kind of a picturesque little spot here, right beside a little lake.
Because people are in the road, I didn't think.
guess water's cheap. is 68 of these plows, from a 10 bottom to a 14 bottom plow. 68 bottoms in total. That would give us in the neighborhood of 90 feet of plow at a pass. boxed up.